Hello and welcome to this latest edition of the Forum from EuroparlTV on the eve of the start of the European elections. We'll be looking at the issues for Europe's 400 million eligible voters through the kaleidoscope of the media, covering events here in the Euro bubble in Brussels. How do journalists extract themselves from this bubble? And what is our panel made of the advances and setbacks of the 7th parliamentary term that's just ended? Let's go first of all to our panel and introduce them. First of all, Alain Franco, correspondent for the French RTL network and Le Point, a very warm welcome. Beatriz Navarro, a reporter for Spain's La Vanguardia, welcome also. George Syriopoulos from DT Greek Television. And last but not least, Christoph Schulz, correspondent for Der Spiegel magazine in Germany. And let's start off, just to get this going, with a quick round robin, right to left, 30 seconds each to answer this question. What are people in your countries, in your country in Spain, talking about when they think about the European elections?
Well, I think they may be thinking mainly about jobs and growth. I mean, about the economy. The economic situation in Spain is quite difficult. They know the EU has a role to play because the EU had the role to play in the very difficult economic decisions that have been taken in the last years. So I think this is a very important issue. From our point of view, from La Vanguardia, our main audience is Catalonia, and there many people, when they vote, they will be thinking also on the possibility of Catalonia becoming an independent state, since remaining inside the European Union is a big aspiration for many people.
Okay, very big expectations there. George, how does it look from your country's point of view?
Je crois que la situation en Grèce est un peu plus complexe pour deux raisons. La première, c'est que nous sommes dans un programme qui est suivi par la Troïka. Alors, les gens, ils veulent s'en débarrasser, si vous voulez, de ces contrôles permanents. Et l'autre côté de la complexité, c'est que nous avons 3 urnes le même jour, c'est-à-dire les élections européennes, les élections régionales et les élections municipales. Alors, ça fait une confusion en général à l'électorat grec.
Okay, we'll see how that turns out. Alain, how does it look from the French point of view?
Chez nous, le débat, pour l'instant, il est focalisé et il est presque monopolisé par l'extrême droite qui est en train de monter et qui pourrait être le premier parti, donc vainqueur de ces élections. Et on assiste à un phénomène que finalement, ce sont les idées de l'extrême droite ou les thèmes imposés par l'extrême droite qui dominent dans la campagne électorale. Ces thèmes, c'est quoi? C'est le social, l'économique, et puis aussi la question de la souveraineté de la France. Je reviens de Paris, on voit partout des affiches « Non à Bruxelles, oui à la France ». Voilà, ça résume.
And across the border, Christoph, entirely different, but perhaps not so different issues.
I think many German voters, if not most of them, are not even aware that there are going to be European elections on the 25th of May. If they are asked about Europe, they probably have a general feeling that Europe is mingling too much into their personal issues, into the too much dealing with small things. But they wouldn't have a concrete reason to blame the European Union. They just have this general feeling that Europe is probably coming too close to them.
Okay, very interesting. We'll develop those themes in due course, but let's just hold those thoughts just a moment and take a look at some of the highlights of the last full year of this term and the issues that a random but balanced selection of MEPs and officials have picked out themselves.
Nous sommes aujourd'hui confrontés au plus grand défi qu'ait connu notre Union, je le crois, dans toute son histoire.
Crise.
The crise. Crise.
Krisen.
Crisis.
Krise.
Crisis.
Crise.
Nous avons ici à choisir entre effectivement défendre la santé publique et les consommateurs ou donner satisfaction à des demandes des lobbies.
Ce qu'il faut aujourd'hui pour l'Europe, c'est convaincre les citoyens. Vous avez 2 catégories de citoyens. Ceux qui cèdent aux sirènes du populisme, de ceux qui beuglent.
Britain is going to make the great escape.
Et vous avez tous les autres citoyens, plus nombreux, qui disent « Nous attendons beaucoup de l'Europe, mais l'Europe ne nous convainc pas dans ce qu'elle fait. »
L'Union européenne n'est pas un paillasson sur lequel on s'essuie les pieds, mais c'est une maison commune que nous construisons ensemble. Monsieur Viktor Orban.
No emergency surgery, no transplant, no long period of recuperation is going to save ACTA.
What we need for Europe is not a federation of nation states, it's a federal union of the European citizens.
I don't know if you listened to the statement of President Obama. Don't worry, we're not spying on US citizens, we're only spying on foreigners. So that's us. That's European citizens. So what kind of a special relationship is that?
Roken is een keuze net als bijvoorbeeld religie. Ik rook al bijna 20 jaar. Het is mijn hobby.
Lobbying kills.
Wer die Europäische Union rundum abschottet, muss sich nicht wundern, wenn Menschen nach illegalen Wegen suchen.
Let me start off by again sort of round robin asking each of you, how you will cover these elections. What are the key issues that you will focus on in order to be the bridge between this incredibly controversial and complex set of institutions here in Brussels and the needs and interests of your people? Let me start with you, Beatrice, first of all again.
Well, I think it's fair to say that sometimes we call these elections European elections, but I don't think they develop. They take place in a European angle. Actually, they take place in a national way. The campaigns are national. So for us, we will be dividing our information on the international pages, and there we will be reporting more about the challenges ahead for the political integration of Europe, social economic issues, and then we will have some coverage. We have started already on the national politics pages covering the campaign itself.
Do you feel that when you look at this big agenda of European stuff that's here at your disposal every day, that actually people are that interested in it?
Well, they may not be interested in the big debates, but sometimes they really have consequences, and people sometimes they found out a little bit late about how come.
And how does it work, Christoph, in Germany? Are people much more connected to the policy, or are they much more interested in their own backyard, as it were?
I think they are much more interested in their own backyard, but that's not something special to Germany. I mean, on the election campaign, we have to deliver a very basic education. I mean, we're doing a series of articles basically explaining what the European Parliament is all about, what the European Commission is all about, what they have done the last few years. That probably the glass is rather half full than half empty, and so on. But very, very serious basic education. And of course, the biggest issue is the race between the top candidates. We try to take these elections as serious at Der Spiegel as a national German election.
Alain, you mentioned earlier the presence of the Front National in French politics and how it dominates things. I mean, how does that, knowing what happens on the ground in your own country, how does that influence how you report Brussels from here?
C'est une question intéressante. Pour dire les choses factuellement et telles qu'elles sont, c'est très difficile quand on est correspondant ici de faire remonter l'information en France sur des choses qui soient aussi bien basiques et dont on a besoin, dont le citoyen a besoin, c'est-à-dire le comment ça marche, et aussi sur des thèmes des élections qui sont par exemple l'Europe est-elle démocratique puisque c'est imposé par le Front National. Le deuxième problème, c'est que nous avons beaucoup d'éditorialistes chez nous en France, dans nos médias, qui pensent que l'Europe c'est la France et donc qui parlent face à ces interlocuteurs d'extrême droite qui disent souvent de grosses contre-vérités, mais la personne en face n'est pas équipée pour avoir fait ce fact-checking et pour répondre à ces contre-vérités. Donc on a un discours de l'extrême droite, ou de l'extrême gauche aussi, qui n'est pas contrebalancé par des experts en face, parce que nous, les experts européens, nous ne pouvons pas remonter autant que nous voudrions l'information vers le haut. Et c'est un vrai problème, c'est quasi démocratique comme problème.
How do you, George, deal with those same questions and also with the question of trying to get across what Europe intends to do?
Je crois que les problèmes qu'ont les journalistes qui couvrent les matières européennes sont les mêmes à tous les pays. C'est-à-dire que nous faisons des grands efforts de distinguer les politiques internes par les politiques européennes. Ça, c'est une chose. L'autre chose, c'est que il y a les voix des candidats. Alors, chaque candidat a son optique, son prisme de voir les choses, et chacun, parfois, dépasse même l'orientation européenne pour des questions de récolter des votes. Alors, ça, c'est un autre problème, car en tant que journaliste, tu dois parfois essayer de controverser cette rhétorique. Et ça, c'est très difficile.
Do you think that the European Union, all the institutions, either collectively or individually, shoot themselves in the foot constantly because they fail to get a message of what European legislation, what the European project is all about?
La relation avec l'Europe, je crois que se base sur deux pylônes. Une, c'est l'orientation européenne, une orientation géopolitique, si vous voulez. Et alors, pour les Grecs, ça c'est clair. Nous appartenons à l'Europe, nous sommes dévoués à l'Europe et nous voulons continuer à être un membre actif de l'Europe. L'autre question, c'est que quoi l'Europe peut faire pour nous? Alors, la plupart des gens, je crois qu'ils attendent beaucoup de choses de l'Europe. La plupart d'eux ne savent pas que l'Europe ne peut pas en donner autant. Mais quand même, ils voient l'Europe comme un sang ou comme une machine miraculeuse qui peut résoudre tous les problèmes, ce qui n'est pas vrai.
Okay, let's take that same question in the context, the question of how does Europe get its message across in the context of Ukraine. Alain, do you think that Europe has sufficiently got its message about its response to the crisis in Ukraine and in Crimea across?
Je crois que sur l'Ukraine, le problème de l'Europe, c'est pas la communication. Le problème de l'Ukraine, c'est que l'Europe a déclenché un mouvement, une grande crise, elle-même, par impréparation, en allant chercher l'Ukraine, en essayant de rapprocher l'Ukraine de l'Europe, sans réfléchir plus avant aux conséquences. On ne va pas titiller l'ours russe sans prendre le risque de se prendre un grand coup de griffe dans la figure. Et c'est ce qui est en train d'arriver. Donc nous ne pouvons pas communiquer sur l'Europe. En tout cas, les gouvernants ne peuvent pas communiquer sur l'Europe parce qu'ils ne savent pas quoi dire sur l'Ukraine, parce qu'ils ne savent pas quoi dire sur l'Ukraine, parce qu'eux-mêmes sont perdus. Donc aujourd'hui, comment voulez-vous communiquer si vous ne savez pas ce que vous voulez dire, si vous ne savez pas ce que vous voulez faire?
Ce n'est que ça. Ce n'est pas aussi un problème de la politique extérieure de l'Europe.
Mais bien évidemment.
Son entité.
Mais bien évidemment.
Qu'il n'y a pas.
Mais bien évidemment.
And do you point these shortcomings out in your reportage?
Mais oui.
Yeah.
Oui,
Yeah.
oui, oui. Ça fait recette d'ailleurs. Parce qu'en France, quand on dit que l'Europe a fait une erreur, vos papiers sont lus, vos papiers sont commentés, etc. Quand on dit en France que l'Europe, ça peut apporter une puissance face aux autres grandes puissances, face à la Chine, etc. Là, on nous traite d'Eurobéa, où on est atteint du syndrome de Stockholm parce qu'on aime tellement la Commission et le Parlement européen.
Christophe, can I ask you, let's move sort of closer to home and these elections and talk about the extreme right. I ask you, because you, perhaps for the first time, are experiencing that in Germany through the Alternative für Deutschland. I mean, how does that influence how you report here from Brussels?
There are basically two questions editors ask us in Brussels and people ask us on the streets. The first thing is the Alternative für Deutschland really a right-wing movement or not? The answer is not so easy because, of course, it developed as a movement against the euro. I mean, now you can say being against the euro is classically right-wing, but it's also classically radical left. But one has to say, of course, that recently certain representatives of that party have spoken, have basically voiced opinions that are going into the very right-wing direction. So yes, I would say that part of that movement is right-wing. That's the first question. The other question that is always being asked to us in Brussels is, how are they connected to the other right-wing movements in France, wherever, the True Finns, in Sweden, and so on. UKIP and so on. And of course, there the answer is, I think, it's quite difficult to cut it out. There's not a whole monolithic right-wing bloc going to the voters on the 25th of May all across Europe, saying we stand for that and that and that. I think the left, the radical left, is much more united, perhaps also because of a very prominent Greek figure being the top candidate. I don't know, but I think that the right-wing movement is very hard to unite.
Beatrice, where would you stand on that question? If you look at the coverage of these elections as a whole, because I know that would you have covered different parts of Europe, not just Spain?
Well, for us, so far, the rise of extremism, as Michael was saying, it's a very broad definition for xenophobic movements, anti-European, anti-integration. There are a lot of nuances in this. And this issue has been a good excuse for us to talk about the European elections in the last 6 months. I remember 5 years ago that was an issue as well, and the fears about the rise of extremism in the end did not really materialize. But I think this year is different because of France, because of the impact of a big, powerful founder member of the EU, giving really a lot of being seduced somehow by this speech. So for us, it's a very interesting development, and also somehow it gives also a reason to talk about the situation in Austria, Hungary, countries that we don't cover that.
It makes it more interesting for you. Okay, we're going to wind this up now. I'm going to kind of go round the table again and remind you, we probably know well enough already, you don't need reminding, of what the turnout was in the elections in 2009, and you can predict for me whether it's going to rise, perhaps as a result of this extreme right tendency or a backlash against it. I don't know, but if you could do that.
Not really. Not really. And of course, that's the sharpest criteria for the question whether this race between the top candidates will be a success or not.
Okay.
Because if not more voters participate in the elections, then Mr. Schulz and Mr. Juncker basically can say, all this personality show has failed.
Okay. Alain, France was 40%.
Tous les sondages laissent à penser que ce sera ça au maximum, sinon moins. Il faut se méfier parce que je pense que la campagne est un petit peu en train de prendre en France, et justement sur de façon assez polarisante, hein, parce que l'extrême droite, quelque part, elle a une qualité, c'est qu'elle oblige à se distinguer et à se positionner face à ces idées qui sont très fortes et très rigides. Donc, il n'est pas impossible que ça monte, mais les élections européennes n'ont jamais fait vraiment recette en France.
Okay, in Greece, thank you very much for that. In Greece, 52% at the last elections. Do you think it's going to be bigger? Just very briefly, because we're winding up now.
Non, cette augmentation qui a eu l'extrême droite était une augmentation par les gens désespérés, comme partout, je crois, en Europe. Mais après le révèlement que ces partis politiques, entre guillemets, politiques grecs, ce n'est qu'une organisation plutôt criminelle, parce qu'il y a eu de dévouement même d'une organisation presque militaire au sein de ce parti. Alors je crois que son pourcentage est beaucoup diminué, et je crois que les gens vont réfléchir 2 fois devant les urnes cette fois.
And in Spain it was 44%. Do you think it's going to be bigger, or
I don't really expect major changes. The campaign has been so far not really exciting. The Conservatives are not very interested in having a huge campaign because these elections somehow are seen as a foreplay of the national elections, and they don't really want to see consequences of that. And the Socialists are also to blame by their own electorate about the way they dealt with the crisis. So, yeah.
Okay, that's about all we have time for. My thanks to my guests, Alain Franco, Beatrice Navarro, George Syriopoulos and Christoph Schulz. Many thanks indeed for joining us, and many thanks to you for joining us also. Interesting weeks ahead for us all, and I hope for you too. Thanks very much.